Our next speaker is Dr. Mildred Cho. Welcome. She is a professor in the Division of Medical Genetics of the Department of Pediatrics at Stanford University, Associate Director of the Stanford Center for Biomedical Ethics, and Director of the Center for Integration of Research on Genetics and Ethics. She's a member of the International and National Advisory Boards, a member of international and national advisory boards, including that for Genome Canada, the March of Dimes, and the Board of Reviewing Editors of Science magazine. Dr. Cho established the Benchside Ethics Consultation Service at Stanford in 2005 and is chair of a working group to develop a national collaborative research ethics consultation service. We're delighted to have you here. Thank you.
Thanks. So I'm here to tell you a little bit more about this research ethics consultation service. And I think that you might have this publication already that I sent previously that describes it, sort of our concept of it. And we borrowed shamelessly from David Rothman's book in this title, but to sort of convey the idea that we were sort of thinking of it as an analog to clinical ethics consultation in the sense that it was bringing a wide range of perspectives and voices to the bench side. And in this, we described that our thinking was that the purpose of our research ethics consultation service was to provide that the overall goal of it was to maximize the benefits and minimize the potential harms of research to society. As my colleague here described, as an alternative to more top-down approaches, seeking a sort of bottom-up approach, but that might be scalable. And also as an adjunct to policy approaches that depend on scientists' awareness and initiatives about social responsibility in science. And we sought to do this by providing a forum for consideration of issues beyond misconduct or responsible conduct of research issues and those that are required by regulation, such as human subjects regulation, and therefore a forum for discussing broader issues of social responsibility. And I will mention that Chris Grady is a member of the Research Ethics Consultation Service at NIH, which is probably the largest, oldest, most well-established one in the country. But ours was actually a bit different in that I think the NIH one combines clinical ethics and research ethics services. Ours was really focused on the research ethics separately from the clinical ethics. And so I will tell you a little bit about our specific experiences at Stanford. Our Benchside Ethics Consultation Service has to date provided over 100, probably about 110 consultations over the last 8 years to researchers at Stanford and outside Stanford, to biotech and pharma companies, to IRBs, hospital ethics committees, funding agencies, including at NIH, journal editors, and research participants on a wide variety of consultation topics. These were not limited to human subjects or clinical research ethical issues, and we were surprised that very few of these were actually about misconduct and RCR issues, so we were happy about that. And there has been a focus on early stages of research, so the planning stages, or even what we call the sort of pre-planning stages, when people would just sort of have an idea about something, which we were also pleased about. So in the first couple of years, 28% of our consults were what we called in the planning or pre-planning stages. Overall, there are 36%. So it's quite a significant chunk. Just to give you an idea of what sorts of things researchers bring to this, and these are initiated by researchers. It includes sort of what we call project-specific consultation topics, which include things that you are very familiar with, such as incidental findings, which was the single most popular topic so far. Questions regarding the sort of distinction between research and clinical practice. Questions about clinical research design and biobanking are examples of this. But we also had a number of researchers come to us and just say, and with the project-specific ones, the researchers come and say, I think there's an ethical issue here of this type, and can you help me with it? In the thing that we're calling field-based topics, these are areas where a researcher doesn't know if there's an ethical or societal issue and says, can you just tell me, we're thinking about moving into this area, can you just talk through with me whether there's anything I should be thinking about in terms of ethical or societal issues. And I have a little asterisk next to the examples that I have there up on the slide to indicate that these were consultations that resulted in a publication, a joint publication between us and the researchers about newly identified or interesting new ethical topics. So this Stanford is not unique in having a research ethics consultation service, and one of the fellows that was working at Stanford doing the research I showed you previously also has now studied this phenomenon more broadly across the country. She did a survey in 2010 and surveyed all the institutions that had a Clinical and Translational Sciences Award from NIH. There were only 46 at the time, but 33 of them already had a research ethics consultation service. And I can talk more offline about why that is. But 9 of those had been started prior to the CTSA funding, but only 2 of them were in existence for 6 or more years. So this is a fairly new thing at the time in 2010 because of the CTSA funding. Some of them provided consultations outside the institution. The majority were supported by CTSA funding, although a quarter had no funding at all. There were several services that were very active in that they conducted more than 10 consultations in the prior year, but most had conducted only fewer than 5 in the prior year. So again, indications that it's a sort of nascent activity. The future of research ethics consultation services in the CTSA is a bit uncertain right now because the nature and extent of the support for it through the CTSA mechanism is a bit uncertain. However, as Dr. Wagner mentioned, I am leading a national effort to create a collaborative service that goes across institutions and would provide consultation to anyone, even if they were not part of the CTSA network. So some of the issues that come up in these and that is faced by the CTSA research ethics consultation services and others alike is sort of the question about whether we need such a thing. Do scientists think they need such a thing? And what do they mean by ethical and social implications? So it's trying to answer this question. We did a survey of US life scientists. 856 of them responded, faculty, staff, postdocs, and graduate students included. About half of them reported that they would find a research ethics consultation service moderately, very, or extremely useful. 36% reported that they would find it personally useful to themselves, while the 51% reporting it said that they would find it useful for their institution. And 36% also reported that an ethical or societal question arose in the course of their own research at least once, where we left the definition of ethical or societal question open, and that was their own interpretation. So of course that issue of what do they think that means is very important and potentially a barrier to utilizing these types of services. So we did do some studies drawing on focus groups, interviews, and again, surveys for this. And some of the potential barriers that we identified are, as will not surprise anyone who knows scientists, that there may be a lack of awareness or about relevance of ethical and societal issues to their own daily practice in the laboratory. So this quote illustrates that. I think a major issue is that many scientists, myself included, don't have a clear idea of what an ethical issue necessarily is and if it applies to them. And also a perceived lack of need of consultation, illustrated by this quote. I feel I'm able to determine and resolve ethical and societal concerns pertaining to my research on my own. And although those are not surprising, I think they're also things that we can address through education in part. They don't trouble me as much as this last quote, which is, I think, more serious, a perceived incongruence of the act of integrating ethics and societal concerns into their own scientific practices and goals, which is more of a climate issue. So this quote says, when you decide on different experiments that you want to do, the first consideration is, of course, to make sure you have the appropriate techniques to be able to do it. But secondly, is it an interesting question, just scientifically speaking, academically, aside from any beneficial contributions it could possibly make? And once you've established that, it's up to you if you want to also emphasize therapeutic applications. So to this scientist, I think this illustrates this idea, which is common in the scientific community, that really doing science is about being good academically, being rigorous, and then it's optional if you want to sort of address these larger societal issues, and addressing societal issues means therapeutic applications. So a very narrow concept of what that is. So this is clearly a potential barrier to sort of this type of integration that requires initiative on the part of the scientists. So another important aspect of this for us has been trying to think about what it means to have a successful program in research ethics consultation. What is a successful consultation service, which obviously requires definition of what the goals are, but that's not necessarily that trivial. You have to really think about what the goals are. Is it engagement in and of itself, or are there other products that you would like to see that come out of that? So one thing that we have looked at is whether uptake of the service has increased, whether the stage of utilization, so going back in the research process, has increased, which is something that we desired as a goal. We think we've seen that trend, so that researchers approach the service earlier in their research process. We've identified new and emerging ethical issues through the consultation, and it creates opportunities for researcher and bioethics collaborations, as well as products such as publications, modifications to research projects, policy changes. So for example, we've had, I think, at least 3 institutional policy changes as a result of the consultations, and at least half a dozen publications, which were joint researcher and bioethics collaborations. One can also measure researcher satisfaction and attitudes, as well as something I think would be important in the long run, which is to try to get a handle on climate change. So the change in institutional and professional climate in terms of giving permission, encouragement, or even expecting that scientists engage with ethical and societal issues. And I just put a quote, which was from an email that I got from a researcher that was unsolicited, which can be an indication of researcher satisfaction. So finally, I save all these. So I think that research ethics consultation is becoming a more established institutional mechanism in the US for integrating ethical and societal considerations into biomedical research that could potentially be broadened outside that scope. It does and has been able to address a broad range of topics and provide services to a range of clients. It has provided opportunities for addressing not only project-specific ethical issues, but also those facing whole fields going beyond responsible conduct of research and misconduct, and also provide opportunities for interdisciplinary collaboration and hopefully climate change. And I think that the services may benefit from institutional support, not just financial support, but support for the whole concept and leadership to encourage its use. Thanks.
Thank you, Mildred.